My name is Madeline Carter, and the last thing my mother ever handed me wasn't a hug. It was a manila folder. I brought pumpkin rolls. They gave me paperwork. I thought I was coming home for dinner. Turns out I was being evicted. Not just from a house, but from the version of family I had been clinging to for years. There was no fight, no raised voices, just polished wine glasses, half smiles, and a chair with my name quietly removed. They didn't forget me. They planned around me. And the worst part? They expected me to thank them for it. But what they didn't know was that the house they tried to steal, the one they stood in so proudly, it was built on my name, my credit, my silence. And this time I didn't cry. I documented. I remembered. I found the clause they hoped I'd forget. Before I show you how a manila folder turned into a reckoning, drop a comment if you've ever been the one they counted out. The one they labeled unstable, emotional, disposable. Because this story, this one's for anyone who ever got written out of the family script and rewrote their own ending instead. Like, subscribe and stay with me. Because when they tried to erase me, they handed me the pen. The scent of cinnamon clung to my coat as I stepped into the familiar hallway. My boots tapped against the hardwood, echoing through a house that used to smell like Sunday comfort. Now it felt like a showroom, polished, curated, slightly too perfect. My mother's favorite dessert sat untouched beside her wine glass. The metal chair scraped louder than any welcome. "You're late," Vanessa said, not even looking up from her phone. Her nails clicked against the screen, polished in a shade called executive decision, no doubt. "I was at the store," I muttered, holding up the bag like a peace offering. "Thought I'd make something nice." Dad didn't respond. He adjusted his napkin on his lap like that took precedence over his daughter showing up alone, jobless, and barely hanging on. Susan, Mom, managed a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Glenn gave a half-hearted nod, the kind you'd give to a distant coworker at a networking event. I placed the pumpkin rolls on the counter, arranging them like I still had a place here. Then I noticed it. My chair wasn't at the table. There were 5 name cards, neatly scripted in Vanessa's handwriting. Mine was stuck on a folding chair at the far end like an afterthought. I sat anyway. Dinner started like a stage play. Everyone performing their roles, laughing too loud at Glenn's stories, pretending not to notice that I hadn't touched my plate. I waited for someone to ask how I was doing. No one did. They talked about Vanessa's new Pilates instructor, Dad's golf handicap, Glenn's promotion at the firm, so I brought it up myself. I was let go last week. Downsizing. I tried to sound casual, like it hadn't hollowed me out. Vanessa snorted into her wine glass. Well, that explains the jeans. The table went silent. I stared at her. "Excuse me?" She waved a hand. "I'm just saying, it's not like you dressed for dinner." I opened my mouth, but Dad cut in. "Maybe it's time you stopped depending on us, Maddie. You're not a kid anymore." The use of Maddie stung more than it should. It used to mean something warm. Now it felt like a weapon. Mom reached under the table and slid something across to me. A manila folder. No words, no explanations. Just that. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside, my birth certificate, old tax forms, the lease to the apartment they co-signed. A paperclip held a post-it. "Utilities transferred. You have 10 days. What is this?" My voice cracked. Vanessa smirked. "We already moved your stuff to the apartment. If you still have the keys, you can get it before the landlord changes the lock." Dad stood up. "This is for your own good." My hands gripped the edge of the table. I could feel my heart pounding, not from surprise, but from the cold precision of it all. This wasn't a reaction. It was a plan. I stood, pushing the folding chair back with a shriek of metal on wood. "Thanks for dinner. I won't stay where I'm not welcome." Nobody stopped me. Not even Mom. It was raining by the time I reached my car, the pumpkin rolls still warm in the passenger seat. They made the whole car smell like betrayal. At my old apartment, I unlocked the door and stepped into silence. A box sat in the middle of the living room. It had been torn open, the lid hanging like a broken jaw. Written in thick black marker across the side were 2 words: useless stuff. They called me deadweight. But the house they live in still rests on my name, my credit, my silence. The box labeled useless stuff sat untouched on my kitchen floor for a day and a half. I couldn't bring myself to open it again. Not after seeing the scrawl. Not after smelling the faint trace of the lavender detergent my mother always used. Like they'd washed the memories clean before throwing them away. Tuesday morning, I stepped over it on my way out. I needed air, movement, something outside this suffocating cocoon of rejection. On the way to the car, Mr. Romero waved at me from his porch. His dog yipped once and settled back into the blanket beside him. "Thought you'd moved out," he said casually. I blinked. "What makes you think that?" He shrugged. "Your sister came by, said she owns the place now, asked if we'd seen any mail for her." A chill ran up my spine. "Did she now?" He nodded. "Said you were just crashing here until she sorted the paperwork. Guess it's hers now, huh?" I smiled tight and nodded, walking to the car before I could say something sharp. Vanessa was never sloppy. If she said it aloud, she was already sure no one would question her. But that house, our house, was never hers to begin with. At least not officially. Back inside, I finally opened the box. Beneath a layer of bubble wrap and broken picture frames, I found what I was looking for: the old green folder from 2017, the refinance packet, a copy of the deed, scrawled Post-its in Vanessa's handwriting, the kind that said, "Sign here, I'll take care of the rest." "Let's just put your name on the paperwork for now," she'd said then. "Credit's tighter on my end, and Dad doesn't want to co-sign again." Back then, I'd said yes, like I always did. It was a townhome, nothing fancy. Just a start. Her start, apparently. The county recorder's office was housed in a gray, rectangular building that looked like it hadn't been updated since dial-up internet. I waited 20 minutes behind a woman paying property taxes and a man trying to register a boat. Finally, Janice called my number. She wore bifocals and a lavender cardigan and moved with the calm of someone who had seen it all. I slid the documents across. "Can you check the current title holder for this property?" She adjusted her glasses and typed. The screen glowed against her face. "Transferred in March 2021, she said. "From Madeline Carter to Vanessa Carter." My throat tightened. "But the mortgage..." She clicked again. "Still under the original borrower, Madeline Carter. You didn't refinance?" I shook my head slowly. Not that I remember. Her eyes flicked to me. "You may want to speak to the bank." It took 3 tries to get through to a real person. When I finally arrived at Missouri Home and Mortgage, Mr. Collins greeted me in a quiet office with beige walls and motivational quotes framed in cursive. He was in his 50s, polite, deliberate. I handed over the refinance form I found in the folder. He studied it, then tapped at his keyboard. "This matches our file," he said. "Processed April 2021. Can I see the signature on file?" He pulled it up. My name was there, just not in my handwriting. The loops were wrong. The E was closed. A counterfeit confidence in every letter. "That's not me," I whispered. Mr. Collins leaned forward. "Would you like to initiate a fraud investigation?" I stared at the screen. For weeks, I had nodded through everything. Numbness had been easier than confrontation. But now I felt something new crawling up my spine. Not rage, not grief. Precision. "Yes," I whispered. Yes, I would. Driving home, the autumn trees looked different. Not brighter, not more hopeful. Just clearer, stripped of illusion. At home, I pulled out my old leather journal. The one I hadn't touched since 2020, when I still believed keep the peace meant something noble. I flipped to a fresh page, uncapped the pen, and wrote slowly, "If they're calling me crazy, I'll show them what sane looks like. With receipts." When they couldn't steal from me silently, they tried to silence me legally. It started with a voicemail. My mother's voice, syrupy and low, like she was carrying a tray of teacups instead of news designed to break me. Hi, sweetheart. Your father and I have just been so worried. You haven't sounded like yourself lately. We've scheduled a little wellness check with Dr. Murphy, just to make sure everything's okay. Just a conversation, darling. No pressure. No pressure. The phrase clawed at me, because pressure in our family didn't scream or shove. It smiled over Sunday dinner and handed you eviction folders between courses. It gaslit with endearments. I almost didn't go, but part of me needed to see it for myself, how far they'd take this. So on a damp Saturday morning, I walked into St. Bridget's Medical Center, past the glossy lobby and neutral walls, and gave my name at the intake desk. The receptionist blinked. You're Madeline Carter? Yes. Just a moment. A nurse came out within minutes. Too fast. Her badge read S. Reynolds, and her sneakers squeaked slightly on the polished floor. This way, Madeline. I followed her into a small beige office where a clipboard already sat on the table, pen uncapped. Printed at the top was the name Dr. Howard Murphy. Beneath it, Voluntary Intake Evaluation, Mental Wellness Unit. My hands went cold. Before I could ask anything, the nurse leaned in slightly, keeping her voice low. You don't have to sign this unless you're here voluntarily, she said, eyes not leaving mine. I didn't book this. She nodded subtly. Then you're free to go. I walked out without touching the pen. No one stopped me. My hands shook as I drove home. Not from fear, not even rage. It was recognition. They weren't just trying to discredit me. They were trying to erase me. From the bank, from the house, and now from my own mind. Back at the apartment, I called Angela Moss, a lawyer I'd worked with during a nonprofit housing project in 2021. She had the sharpest voice I knew. Precise, not cruel. I told her everything in one breathless spill. The forged refinance, the deed, the visit to the bank, and now the mental health ambush. Send me every document you have, she said. Today? I scanned the folder, zipped the files, and sent them. Then I opened my inbox and froze. Subject? I worked with Vanessa. You're not the only one. From Jillian Reyes' body. I have evidence. She did this to me, too. Let's talk. Attached. A PDF. I opened it with trembling fingers. Screenshots of emails, Slack messages, text threads. Vanessa's tone was unmistakable, even typed, controlling, calculated. One stood out. Vanessa Carter. If she talks, we say she's unstable. No one's going to believe her anyway. I stared at the screen. So it wasn't just about money. It wasn't just property. This was pattern, a system, a script she'd used before, and would use again. An hour later, I sat across from Jillian at a quiet cafe tucked behind a bookstore. She looked older than me by maybe 6 years, in a weathered leather jacket and worn confidence. She made me co-sign on a startup, she said. Used my credit, then ghosted me when it crashed. Said I was obsessed, that I needed help. People believed her. And now? She smiled grimly. Now I have every email she ever sent, and I'm ready. She slid her phone toward me, screen bright. Vanessa's words plain as day. Vanessa Carter. She's too emotional. A lawyer won't help her. I'll make sure of it. I could barely breathe. She was right about one thing, I murmured. No one was going to believe me. I looked up at Jillian, then back at the phone. But she made one mistake. What's that? They wanted me quiet. Instead, they handed me a microphone. I didn't raise my voice. I raised the truth, and let it echo louder than their lies ever could. It was just after noon on November 1st when I cleared the clutter off my kitchen table, stacked 3 cookbooks, and propped up my phone. The window let in soft, unforgiving light. I didn't bother with makeup or filters. I wanted to be seen, fully, plainly, unmistakably me. Angela had advised me to keep it concise, factual. Lead with the documents, don't speculate, let them connect the dots. I clicked record. My name is Madeline Carter, I began, and I want to tell you how I ended up being erased. On paper, in memory, and almost in mind. I told the story chronologically, calmly, carefully. No rage, no bitterness. I held up the deed first. The original with both our names, mine printed, hers penciled in later like a footnote trying to overtake the story. Then the mortgage documents, one from 2017 with my signature, and one from 2021, crooked loops and inconsistent lettering. I didn't sign this, I said. A handwriting expert confirmed it. Next, the birthday card from 2018, Vanessa's swirly handwriting. Thanks for saving the house. Again, couldn't have done it without you. Then screenshots, emails where I handled utilities, negotiated with the HOA, filed taxes on behalf of the family trust. And finally, the Slack message from her account. Cold and casual. If she talks, we say she's unstable. No one's going to believe her anyway. I wasn't going to say anything, I said, looking into the lens. But then they tried to put me in a hospital under my own name. And that's when I realized silence is what they count on. I uploaded the video without a fancy title. Just the folder they gave me. 6 hours later, my inbox imploded. 60,000 views. Then 80. Then over 100. The comments rolled in like surf. I'm shaking. My sister did this to me too. Dead weight, my foot. She's so calm. That makes it even more real. Gaslighting doesn't work when receipts come laminated. Trending hashtags started to form. Believe Madeline. Receipts speak? Not so, golden child. Then Vanessa responded. A shaky Instagram live, eyes glossy, voice trembling just enough to seem human. I never wanted this to go public, she said. I was only ever trying to protect her. She's been struggling for a while and we didn't know what to do. A tear slid down her cheek. The comments weren't having it. That sounds like guilt, not grief. Protect her by forging her name? Trying to commit someone is not concern. Then Jillian posted her own thread. Screenshots, emails, voice memos, another forged document. I was called emotional, then irrational, then unstable. Turns out all it took to be crazy was saying no to Vanessa. Within an hour, a former coworker of Vanessa's added her own story, then a college friend. Reddit lit up with a thread titled, "She Built It. They buried her, until now." Someone dug up an old HOA newsletter thanking M. Carter for managing the neighborhood's legal filing in 2020, while Vanessa was tagged in vacation photos from Tulum that same week. And then my phone buzzed. An email from Angela. Subject, confirmation body. The clause is real. We're filing. Get ready. They built their kingdom on my silence. I built mine on receipts and a forgotten clause buried in a dead woman's trust. Angela slid the manila folder across the polished desk, her nails clicking softly on the surface. She didn't smile, but her eyes held the satisfaction of someone watching a match tip into dry kindling. This is the one that'll stick. I opened the folder. My name was at the top. Petition to freeze and reclaim title. Based on a clause no one remembered, except me. Clause 3.7. I could still hear Aunt Helena's voice, raspy and amused. The family's good at forgetting things. So I bury what matters in writing. The clause read, in the event that the primary benefactor provides continuous financial support, maintenance, and taxes for a period of no less than 5 consecutive years, exclusive ownership rights shall transfer to that individual, regardless of verbal agreements or occupancy. They had counted on me not reading the trust document. But I had. Back in 2017, after Vanessa had said, let's just put your name down for now. I remembered it not because it mattered then, but because it hadn't. Back then, I still believed in family more than fine print. Not anymore. Angela and I filed everything that afternoon. 5 years of receipts, screenshots of maintenance calls, utility payments, property taxes. The document trail was so complete it looked like a forensic audit, and in many ways it was. At the courthouse, I watched the clerk's stamp land on the top page. Officially submitted. Back in the car, I didn't start the engine right away. I stared at the steering wheel and remembered spring 2017, right after Aunt Helena's funeral. Vanessa had refused to come, said it was too far and Helena was too strange. But I went. I remembered standing in Helena's garden, the air thick with lilacs and dust, while the lawyer read the terms aloud. I remembered thinking how lonely she must have felt, setting up legal protections no one would ever appreciate. I remembered the small tap of her ringed hand on mine. "You'll need this more than they think," she'd whispered. Now I knew what she meant. That evening, I drove past my parents' house. My name wasn't on the mailbox anymore. The garden lights were still set to warm white. My mother's favorite fountain gurgled near the walkway. It didn't hurt exactly. Not like it used to. It just felt accurate. Like a mirror showing the house as it truly was. Ornate, hollow, cold. Then the alert hit my phone. Missouri woman files to reclaim home family. Tried to erase her from it was just a local piece. Small circulation. But it was out there. My name in ink, on record, tied to something true. When I got home, Angela called. "It's done," she said. "Judge signed the motion this morning. They've been served." The silence that followed didn't need to be filled. It was full already, with breath and weight and something like steadiness. My phone buzzed again. "Vanessa, you said you'd never use that clause. You promised." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed, "Me. And you promised you wouldn't weaponize me." I hit send, then turned my phone off. I didn't burn the house down. I gave it away. To someone who'd never used it to hurt another soul. The key clicked in the front door, echoing into the hollow space like a final breath. The house was still. Not quiet. There was too much silence for that. This was the kind of stillness that followed a storm, when all the debris had settled and you were left with the shape of things. I stepped inside. The same floorboards. The same chandelier over the dining table that once shimmered over so many performances. But no people. No scripts. Just me. The envelope sat snug in my coat pocket. Addressed to Reclaim Foundation, stamped and signed. I placed it on the kitchen counter next to a single folded sheet of paper. "This property, previously owned by Madeline Carter, is hereby donated in full to the Reclaim Foundation for Women's Legal Aid and Shelter." I didn't linger. The final walkthrough was not sentimental. I opened the linen closet, not expecting ghosts, just towels. I stood in the bedroom doorway, remembering the rustle of fights muffled behind wood. The hallway mirror had been removed, leaving a pale outline on the wall like a scar the house refused to hide. Downstairs, I passed the laundry room. The door squeaked in the same broken rhythm it always had. It was just a house. It always had been. The mistake was thinking it could ever be home. I pulled the front door shut. Not slammed, not locked, just closed. Back at my new place, the garden was bright with early winter blossoms, those stubborn ones that didn't care what the season dictated. I walked barefoot across the damp ground, the soft mud cool against my skin. From my drawer, I took the silver pendant. The one my mother gave me years ago on a birthday they almost forgot. "Family doesn't cut each other off," she had written in the card that came with it. A line so confidently false, it had taken me years to realize the lie wasn't just in the action, it was in the belief. I tied the pendant to a branch of the blooming hawthorn tree. Let it hang. Let it weather. Weeks later, I sat across from a mic, a soft halo of light catching the edge of the headphones. "It's hard," the podcast host said, voice warm but steady, "to talk about betrayal, especially when it's blood." I nodded. "We call it betrayal. but sometimes it's just someone finally telling you who they really are. And I believed them. There was a pause, a breath. I let it hang. When the episode aired, my inbox filled again, but this time not with pity or outrage, with resonance, with witness. Then came a message from Jillian. Another woman came forward, said she only had the courage because you spoke first. I stared at it for a while, not smiling, not crying, just breathing. That night, I watered the garden. The earth drank deeply. The sky was wide and quiet. And as I moved between the rosebush and the hawthorn, a whisper of wind passed through the branches. This time, I built my own table. And every seat is mine to give, or not. I didn't cry when I opened the front door. I thought I might. But all I felt was a quiet, unfamiliar peace. The air in the house was still, untouched. No arguing voices, no thinly veiled jabs from Vanessa, no hovering presence of my mother's judgmental silences. Just light pouring in from the back windows and the faint smell of cedar from the kitchen cabinets. The same cabinets I'd once installed myself with money I saved working weekends at the clinic. The silence wasn't empty. It was earned. I walked slowly through the rooms, pausing at corners that once held shadows. The hallway where my father once muttered, "You'll never keep a job with that attitude." The fireplace Vanessa and I used to sit beside before she learned how to sharpen her smiles into weapons. The kitchen counter where my mother once left a note folded perfectly into thirds. "Let's try being kind today." And there, on the dining table, I placed the manila folder. Not the same one they gave me. That one held papers meant to exile me. This one held a deed, a legal transfer, a signature of ownership, and a typed cover sheet that simply read, "Donated to Reclaim Foundation for Transitional Housing." Let the next woman who walks through these doors carry only her own story, not someone else's shame. I didn't burn the house down. I gave it away. I walked out without looking back, not in defiance, but in freedom. At home, I took the old silver pendant from the box marked useless stuff. It was tarnished now, but the inscription on the back was still clear. "Family is a garden. Tend it well." I tied it gently to a branch of the lemon tree I'd planted 3 years ago, back when I still thought I could fix things by staying quiet. Now, it bloomed. Later that week, I sat across from a podcast host in a small studio downtown. They asked me, "What would you tell someone who's just now realizing their family isn't what they believed?" I didn't hesitate. "We call it betrayal," I said. "But sometimes it's just someone finally telling you who they really are. And when they do, believe them." I didn't need revenge. I didn't need them to say sorry. I just needed to live a life they couldn't erase. And now I do. Jillian texted me the next day. Another woman just came forward, said your story helped her speak. I smiled. Not because I wanted to be a hero, but because silence no longer felt like a refuge. It felt like complicity. So I chose something louder. Not screaming, not rage, just truth. Measured, steady, and permanent. They built their house on my credit, my name, my silence. I reclaimed mine with my voice. And this time, every seat at my table is mine to give. Or not. Justice didn't knock on Madeline's door. It waited until she was brave enough to open it herself. What began with exclusion and betrayal ended with dignity, clarity, and undeniable truth. Because when injustice is met with unwavering courage, the final verdict doesn't need volume. Only proof. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. If you've ever been called too much, too emotional, too unstable, too dramatic, when really, all you ever were was too aware. This story was for you. They tried to erase me with politeness, with paperwork, with the kind of silence that dresses up as love and buries betrayal under linen napkins and monogrammed envelopes. But silence isn't kindness, and love doesn't come with eviction notices. For too long, I stayed quiet, trying to keep the peace, trying not to cause a scene. But when they crossed the line, forging my name, rewriting my role, and trying to take not just my home but my sanity, I didn't scream. I showed the receipts. I let truth do the talking. And in the end, it echoed louder than their lies ever could. So if you've made it this far, thank you. Truly. For staying with me until the last word. For sitting through the mess and the memory. For witnessing what happens when a woman chooses clarity over performance. This channel isn't about revenge. It's about recognition. It's about giving voice to the ones who were told they were too sensitive. When really, we were just the first to see the cracks. Drop a comment below if you've ever had to rebuild from scratch. If you've ever had your name removed from the table but still found a way to rise. Share this with someone who's carrying a folder full of forgotten truths. Someone who needs a sign that it's not too late to reclaim their name and rewrite the narrative. And if this isn't your first time here, if you've been part of this quiet community of truth tellers and record keepers, thank you. Your presence matters. Your story matters. You matter. So stay, subscribe. Because this isn't the end of Madeline's story. And it's not the end of yours either. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. It doesn't slam doors or burn bridges. It just closes the file, signs the deed, and walks out with peace. Thank you for watching. Thank you for remembering with me. And thank you for being here.